Welcome everyone to Classic Amateurs. My name is Norman and I'm here with Raz.
Hi everyone, welcome on board. Good to see you, Norm.
Good to see you, Raz. Here at the Classic Amateurs, we discuss books that we read, the books that we believe are classics, and books that we believe that the other one should read. What do you have for me today, Raz?
Well, there's a book that's still in bookstores on the shelf. You might find it in the airport. It's imposing. It's thick. It's white, and it talks about human
The
beings.
Bible.
The opposite of Bible because it's white. Bible tends to be black, but it builds a lot on the same spiritual elements. And there's something about it that just keeps on being pertinent to people. It's still on bookshelves, even though it's been published in 2014. It's called Sapiens by Yuval Harari. And there's just something really sticky about it. And I really wanted to take this time, and I know you haven't read it, to just introduce it to you. Why is this book still on the shelves? 7 years later, what makes it interesting enough that someone would continue reading it? This book is actually part of what became kind of the a whole new segment. I don't know if it existed before this book materialized, but it definitely consolidated as a segment in publishing that is it's called the brainy books. We had a flood of personal development things afterwards, but we also had a flood of kind of sciency, combining research with the narrative trend. Think of Freakonomics, think of a whole list of books of that sort. And
Pop
this just
science.
pop science exactly, and it does something really wonderful. Um, and I would like to also express admiration and also criticize it. What it does wonderfully well. So just for before I go into that, to answer your question, I believe in 2008 it was still selling hundreds of thousands of copies in the UK alone, right, in a matter of a year. So kind of 500,000. If you extrapolate that to the world, it's still a multi-million copy book year on year, and I believe it's still persisting to some
Do
extent.
you do you feel that's because it has a really cool title, or is it just like a really pretty cover? Maybe people just buy it because they like the cover.
I will describe this cover. I don't know if you've seen the cover. It's got a brief history of humankind and, of course, sapiens, which maybe most people would understand that refers to humans, and then like a human print on that. But the irony is that it's not. It's brief, but not so much. I think it has at least about 400 pages, 368
Jesus.
pages.
Is that
But
what brief means?
that's the irony, right? It works on multiple levels. This is where I wanted to touch it. This is what's wonderful about it, because I think it achieves something that many books afterwards realized in this pop science genre is that, what it really achieves is making you feel good about yourself. How does it achieve that? Here you are with the so-called brief, and it's not brief, it's an imposing book, 400 pages, and here you are devouring it within a matter of a day, depending on your speed. And you're asking yourself, wow, I'm actually pretty smart. I'm actually reading this super fast, and look at all these science things, science bits. Here I'm actually smarter after having read this book. I'm more
Nice.
significant. And I think this is what it really truly achieves. It's kind of making you feel good about yourself, but also making you feel bad about yourself. So there's some triggers in here, very interesting psychology of this narrative. Then I can give you some examples later that
It's
actually makes you.
like it's like it sounds like the book is nagging you, like it's giving you a compliment, but it's like a backhanded compliment.
I'm just
Makes you
going to
feel
jump
good, but
into it.
also not. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what makes a good story, right? If you think about the structure of a story, you need to have a good setup, you need to have a good conflict. Then you're going to have the journey of the hero, and then some climax, and an exciting end. And this book, even though it's built on, let's say, summaries or abstracts of history and anthropology, that it goes on to weave a very very interesting story. So the setup is obviously humans, and it does a very interesting job. It it simplifies things to the extreme. And this is, and I still haven't nailed this point. What it really achieves
Hmm.
is simplicity. It reads so well, even though it's 400 books. It reads like someone is telling you a story, like your
400
mother.
pages.
Mother is putting you to bed. The
Hmm.
condensation, the simplicity of the writing is so tight that it's so approachable. So whereas before, you had science that was only for a certain reader with a certain IQ and a certain discipline around reading, being able to assimilate long sentences. Here you have an amazingly tight writing that still remains compelling. That sometimes offers sentences of one word or two words. So it's really like a spoken word book. However,
Is
the topics are so relatively serious that it makes you feel like you start mastering the topic. It empowers you to have opinions about things that otherwise you wouldn't feel comfortable having.
Do you think, I didn't read the book, obviously, so I'm just being hypothetical. Do you think it is a bit of a Downingkruger effect when you know a little bit about a subject and you feel very confident about your knowledge?
Hmm. Well, to some extent, that's how I feel right now. Yeah, I think we all have that bias, right? I
Sure.
think I don't have the quote on the top of my head, but there's something about kind of being stupid and having the impression that you know everything. And I think the more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything. I think that was kind of an Einstein or a Newton topic, right? I know that I don't know anything. And it's definitely the opposite in this case. You have the impression, because of the bird's eye view that this book is offering you around human evolution from the earliest of times to today and the future, hypothetically, it gives you this impression, this false impression that you see it all. You understand it all better than you ever had. In a way, it offers the same thing religion offers you in a sense of meaning, a sense of understanding. However, it does it, with science, and that's what makes you feel like it's more credible, especially in the lack of religion when you when you,
Yeah.
when you have
Is
that
this,
weird gap.
does this book make you feel like you are the crown of creation? Sorry, evolution in this case?
Well, I mean, there are chapters in the book that call humans God, right? So
Hmm.
hear me out. Here, coming back to the pure structure of the narrative, it starts off with the setting where it explains to you what physics is, and I swear I just need to read from this because it's to give you a sense of the simplicity. And it's so simple, it's deceptively simple, and it can be incorrect, and you still kind of buy it and move on. So to give you an example, just him describing, or the author describing what chemistry is. So, about 13.5 billion years ago, matter, energy, time, and space came into being in what is known as the Big Bang. The story of these fundamental features of our universe is called physics. After 300,000 years after the appearance, matter and energy started to coalesce into complex structures called atoms, which then combined into molecules. The story of atoms, molecules, and their interactions is called chemistry. So it gives you these very semi-scientific, semi-correct definitions of some concepts, and then just kind of builds on it. But what it does
It's
really well
awesome.
from the get-go, it's great, and it's that amazing perspective. You see it all happening from the very earliest of time. But what it does really well, it's setting up the hero, us. And what it does fascinating well is that uh, it basically talks about the chapter is actually the first chapter is called "An Animal of No Significance." So it sets up the hero ourselves as being this
Hmm.
individual of no significance. So it achieves two things. Well, you've got the hero in the story; it's obviously going to walk us through our journey, but it also lowers our expectations about who we are and kind of hits a bit of our ego, and it traps us a little bit psychologically. Wait a second, I don't matter, right? So you this idea is playing with, you know, who we are and our constant search for meaning, and it's telling us from the very beginning, you don't matter. There's something maybe about only Game of Thrones achieves that, where the individual doesn't matter, right? But you just want to see the next episode, because
Uh-huh,
it's
I
kind of
see.
all sociologically driven. It's all top down, it's all anthropological, yet it keeps going. And I think I don't want to jump around to the criticism which I had at the end, but I will call out that maybe there's this blatant ignorance of the individual consciousness throughout the whole book that is maybe missing. a few other things, but I'll touch upon it
What does that
later.
mean? Elaborate on
Well,
that.
there's something about sociology and anthropology where you just see, well, it's an observing of what is happening without actually, one hand, assuming it's inevitable, and case in point, the idea of singularity. We're seeing so much innovation around. We've spoken about it when we spoke about Peter Thiel's criticisms. We see things changing so quickly. We just assume that innovation is a given, that man was supposed to rise, become conscious, evolve socially, build societies, industrial revolution, and then bionics, chips in your brain, cyborgs, artificial intelligence, and that's a given. So this idea that
Sci-fi, baby.
it was meant to be, and so there's no focus or no mention of actually individuals making choices along the way, ethical choices, opting for one over the other. Individuals don't matter in this narrative. It's only the collective humans that matter, and
So
that's
it
what's
is this is like a scientific communism, basically, because it's
I,
all like everyone
I,
matters.
I'm gonna touch upon that. No one matters and everybody matters, which is
Oh,
the problem with socialism. But there's an undertone of that, right? We can talk about that politics later. But I think what it achieves at the beginning is, like 2 million years ago, you had these species emerging and diverging from other apes, and then who would have thought we would walk the moon? So it's humbling to think that. Uh, we ended up being the species that ended up achieving all these things, and it's quite pejorative in the way it approaches, because it actually makes all sorts of ironies that are very triggering. And I think where part of the success of the book is like asking, hey, why was it not cats, big cats, that ended up evolving like this, and it was us humans? What made us special? We're just another
hmm.
mammal. So the fact that we're so kind of these marginal creatures. We're being called marginal constantly, like there's so much bashing of humans at the beginning that you don't matter. It's kind of a Louis C.K. You think you matter? You don't matter. And we just want to hear
It's
more about that, right?
I find it weird. Like the author was like, "I'm writing this for humans, but I'm just gonna criticize them." It's
And they're
like,
just
at
going to
the-
love it, eat it up, eat it
yeah,
up.
eat it up.
So what it does really, you might ask, what does it do really well? As I mentioned, it's kind of fake sciencey. It takes some ideas that are sciencey and then it weaves them through non sequiturs, through these logical leaps. Most likely, this is kind of why it happened. But it throws surprising facts at you, so you don't really see the logic. So then it feeds you interesting things. To give you an example, the first time I was reading this 7 years ago, I didn't know that humans were born prematurely. Maybe I was stupid. I hadn't read about it. I just had no idea that human beings are born a trimester, 3 months earlier than they should be compared to other mammals. And
I
then
see.
it gives you all these graphic visuals of women kind of suffering, and the fact that the child is so fragile, and
Is
hips having being too, the trade-off between running and the width of the hip in order to maintain the pregnancy and to carry it to full term, and the fact that we've made that trade-off in the sense of sacrificing the child reaching full kind of full term. It's just interesting graphic visuals, of our history. So it's very rich in that detail. Um, and then
yeah.
there's another fascinating. Sorry, did you have a question?
This is what I wanted to say. That yeah, from what I remember, humans born prematurely because we stood up, and because we stood up and we walk on two legs, the hips narrowed down, right?
Well, the fact that we were the only, really, some of the probably the only mammals that spend so much time with their parents until they're 18, we're absolutely useless. It's kind of, it just reinforces that thesis, like, we're not really that good. Again, just hammering that idea. There's something about us. Why does it take so long? For what? You keep asking yourself, you're reading through this, you're hearing all these dark facts about our vulnerabilities. And you're asking yourself, to what end? And
Do you
also,
think
he
this increased suicide rates after people read it and they were like, "Ah, this is terrible. I'm terrible."
I think some people might leave with the wrong ideas out of this. Just to give you another example to your point about suicide, I think the idea of anxiety. So here you go. A very interesting fact that I didn't know, as again I was mind blown reading, was that our original niche was actually sucking the marrow out of the bones. Here we are on the savannah, and it's the lions that actually kill the hunt, the gazelles, and after the lions have finished devouring the meat, the carcass, we sneak in afterwards, and we suck the marrow out of the animals. A
Wow, what
bit.
a culinary specialty.
There's an Italian recipe called Osoboko, which is one of my favorites, which may explain my evolutionary past.
Hmm.
But his point was actually, and this is where he makes kind of these logical leaps. I don't know if there's science behind this, but he claims that ultimately through our ability to communicate and collaborate, we ended up superseding the apex cats in the chain. But what happened is that our biology didn't change. So from underdogs, we became top predators, but we still suffer from the same anxiety of mid to lower tier mammals that are just at the end, feasting at the end, of everything. And that explains our anxiety, and it explains our cruelty. So a few leaps there in terms of A to B, but I like the way.
It makes sense to
It's a
me.
great story. It's a great story.
I wonder how many crazy ideas we saw that we believed because it sounded sciencey enough, right? I'm not sure.
But there was a time, I was just hearing this recently in Australia. There was one point in maternity wards where they were just pooling all the milk from all the mothers and then sharing it collectively with the children. This is pre-AIDS, probably. Because that was probably the science of the time, said, to each according to their needs.
Do you think that the milk distribution was like a socialist revolution? Like they were like, okay, we can't take over the government, but we can take over the breastfeeding clinic.
Yeah, milk has nothing to do with the relationship between the mother and the child, which is two individuals. It's a commodity that should be shared equally across
True.
everyone.
Based.
I'm going to give you one more example from the beginning around our relationship with other species. And again, I found this pretty fascinating. Human species were not alone, there were others, the Neanderthals. And I think we're kind of 1 to 4% Neanderthal today. So the question was, did we kind of mate with them, or did we kill them? And
I see.
the so what if there was a bit of both happening there? You were talking about at the beginning. This book is quite controversial. Why is that? It's just starting with this posture around being human. It delves into interesting posture around this element of kind of cruelty. Um, one of which was, for instance, related to our treatment of animals, and the fact that normally if a species is, let's say, prolific, you see it's a good thing that it multiplies, is doing really well. But here we've kind of tamed that biology. We've taken animals, we're reproducing, enabling them to reproduce at scale. So technically, on one hand, cows are really prolific. They're a successful species, but at the end of the day, they're being sacrificed for our good. Is that fair? Is that, and then it jumps from being scientific to jump to depicting in detail, the the experience of a calf that is not allowed to play with other calves, and to maintain the juiciness of its meat. And it goes, it gets dark very quickly, and it just to trigger you a little bit into exactly on the thesis of, you are anxious, you are cruel, here's what you're doing, it's wrong. industrialized meat is wrong. You
Oh,
know, and
so
and and
is this guy a vegetarian or a vegan?
I haven't even done the research, but there's some ideological undertones in this. Another bashing that he's doing is against the Catholic Church. He's like,
Oh,
again, to the
nice.
point of, normally you have entities, organisms that require biological reproduction to move forward, but we've managed to build platforms through effectively the logos, our ability to communicate and create order through our speech, that enables institutions to reproduce and perpetuate despite the lack of genetic material being carried forward. And there's a picture of the Pope that is able to lead forward the Catholic Church despite his how do you call it, celibacy. So there's a few nods, a few teasers, a few whatevers. But I think just to kind of to wrap it up, yeah, I think it's kind of pop. It's a bit tabloidy. It's extremely. It gives you the impression that you're reading something extremely scientific, lengthy, but it gives you two-word sentences to some extent. And then towards the end, as you read through, imagine that you're seeing human evolution through a tree of knowledge, all the biblical themes superposed to scientific evolution and history. Towards the end, it veers into the sci-fi genre around prophecy, because to his credit, he calls out kind of the increasing bioengineering of humans, starting off with castration again as a form of bioengineering that we do both to oxen or dogs, and we do to humans as well. We're
Desexing.
looking for, yeah, for beautiful voices. We've done that in the past. All the way to now growing organs on mice. We see very nice images of that. Bionic life, where an amputee can use a robotic arm, to effectively AI inorganic life. And again, stressing this, I think maybe that's the ideological element to it, is that stressing this idea of singularity that we spoke at the beginning. This is inevitable. So he's calling out the question, is the question effectively, what do you want to become, given that you have this arsenal now of innovation that is inevitable? And he's calling out, is the question, what is it that you want to become, or is it because you can actually engineer desire, is the true question. uh, what do you want to want? Can your desires truly be engineered? So he's touching upon the tangent between science, inevitability, science actually beating consciousness. So this is where I think the logic kind of fragments, and he's raising an important question that is not covered through the whole book, which is, where does the individual lie in this thing? Is there a room for individual choices, for consciousness? I think that's the big absence in this whole book, and it cannot be present because it's taking this sociological, anthropological view. But I think the problem of the whole frame up, and it's what makes it really tabloidy, is the alarmist tone in the last chapter, right? So, which to probably contributed to the whole the sales. The idea that it scares you because we don't know where we're going. We're on this rock and we're going
Wait,
60 kilometers a second, and we don't know where we're going, if that's even correct.
wait, but he seems to advocate the idea that our society, if I understand correctly, that our society is predetermined in a way, because he says, like, we are going somewhere. We are not sure where, but we are definitely going there. And you as an individual just need to find your place in it. Am I interpreting this correctly?
More than that, although to your point, to the earlier point about lack of individual, I think there's a mention there about the role of the reason why we don't have violence, for instance, is because of state monopolizing violence, for instance, which is probably, there's studies around that, but it never talks about the individual itself and their own choices. But I think, just to give you a sense of the tone of the book, which is, you have to read it to really experience it. But for instance, seeking little more than comfort and amusement, yet never feeling truly satisfied. is how humans are described. And this is creating the cruelty that I spoke about around the animals, the degradation of the environment, and so on. And I think it's just talking to the kind of the chaotic element of living and not seeing the other side of humanity, right? The individual side of humanity. The immense progress that individuals have made through their choices in helping others and drawing us from kind of the dark ages of our evolution into this very fragile present, and still the vision about a better future for all of us that we're all working towards on an individual level. So I think it's kind of intentionally missing that mark and preferring bashing a little bit humans, it being a bit kind of anti-human to some extent. Oh, these
Great.
sapiens, just cruel, dirty, and yeah,
I hate
ignorant.
them. I don't want to meet them. Who are
Yeah,
these people?
but despite that, he wrote another book after the success of the first one, which is called Homo Deus, which I tried to read but I didn't enjoy.
Mm.
I'm not recommending the second one. And I think the only success of that book was the fact that it was sitting next to the first one. So the second one was black. It was emphasizing the white one even more, so people bought more of it.
Nice.
Those are my thoughts around this book.
Cool. I mean, by the sound of it, there are plenty of controversial takes there that you probably don't agree with or you don't like that much, but you still liked it. So you liked the book overall, which means that there's definitely something about it. It's like an abusive ex or something, It's like you just kind of want to go back there and
Look,
have
we
another
had a
fight.
look. I wouldn't go back to it. I wouldn't, but we had some good times.
There was some good times there. Nice. No, thank you for introducing me to this book. I Would you recommend it? Do you consider it a classic?
Yeah, I think it still reads well today, and I recently skimmed through it just the other day in preparation for this, just reading the first few chapters and the last one. It's amazingly easy to read, and for all the good and bad reasons that I've highlighted earlier, it's worth having a look at.
Good, good. No, I'm happy for you. It sounds like I could read this book and then go around pissing people off with these controversial opinions. So I'll definitely give it a shot.
You'd have the ideological ammunition to go ahead.
Absolutely. It sounds sciencey, so it's true, right?
It's got to be.
All right, cool. Thank you for tuning in. This was Classic Amateurs. Talk to you next week.